Daredevil Born Again Season 2 Episode 1 is officially out and we need to talk about it. So that's why today we're talking Daredevil Born Again Season 2 Episode Breakdown and Review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Daredevil Born Again Season 2 Episode 1. I know this is a little bit late, however, next week I will do better to get this video out more on time. But with all of that being said, let's get right into it. So getting into some of the things I really liked about this episode, especially starting off, the entire scene of Daredevil on the boat was definitely really awesome. Seeing that all black suit was sick. It looks absolutely perfect, and although I do definitely prefer the red suit because I feel like it pops way more off screen, however, considering the storyline they are going with this season, it makes way more sense for him to have the all black suit. He needs much more stealth, so a red suit that pops a little bit more would not make sense. So from a story perspective, it definitely fits with the story, and not only that, it looks really cool too. And watching him just go throughout the ship and take out multiple different mercenaries was absolutely awesome. The action in this show, to me, is always really good. I feel like a lot of the choreography just really works well. The fighting style of Daredevil is shown to be unique, and they definitely highlighted that in this moment. Some of the other cool things that I found with this particular scene on the boat was when Matt realized something was wrong, and you see him start to use his senses, and he uses that echolocation to start to hear everything. That was really awesome. When he grabbed the watch, I had no clue what he was doing. For some reason, I thought that would help him time out whatever explosion was happening. However, aside from that, I could not come up with anything. However, it was actually just a way for them to properly locate all of the arms that Fisk was attempting to have smuggled. So all in all, this moment definitely shows Daredevil's ingenuity on top of how capable he is as a fighter, which we've seen for multiple seasons by this point. Now, after all that happens, the next notable thing is between Matt and Karen. Matt and Karen get a little busy. They have somewhat of a makeout sesh. Now, I personally am not team Matt and Karen. I personally have always been a fan of Elektra with Daredevil, so I'm always going to be someone who ships the two of them together versus Karen and Matt ever being together. However, it does work within the confines of the show. The context around the two characters, they do fit really well together, and more specifically, what has been happening as of late, it definitely fits for the two characters to be joined together at this point. They quite literally have been through so much together, it just makes sense. And now they're quite literally on the run together, fighting against what seem like insurmountable odds. So the fact that all of that could help to push the two of them together makes sense and adds up to me. I just personally definitely prefer Elektra. However, my personal bias aside, I can acknowledge that they do have good chemistry and it fits within the confines that have been set up by the show and for these two characters to be together. Now, probably the most important thing that I want to talk about from this episode, minus the final scenes, because we'll get to that in a little bit, we have Shaggy appearing. That is why, as you can see, I have the Mystery Machine shirt on. Shaggy Rogers makes an appearance. Matthew Lillard is officially in Daredevil. He is canon to the Daredevil universe, and although he is not obviously playing Shaggy Rogers, that would not make sense, although it would be absolutely hilarious. He is playing a pretty pivotal role, and I feel like we are just going to get teased more and more with what his character is up to, who his character is working for. He is a character called Mr. Charles. That's really all we get from him. However, every scene he's in, he pretty much either steals the scene or he commands the most respect in the entire room. And that's crazy because when he is in the room, Wilson Fisk is there virtually every time. When we first see him in the mayor's office, the attorney general is giving Fisk the business, kind of berating him and saying, you need some oversight. You have these emergency powers, but that's not going to totally work for us. From now on, you need oversight, and you're going to need the approval of us and the governor to continue to operate how you've been operating. However, in this moment, Matthew Lillard's character, Mr. Charles, simply says, you may want to answer your phone. And after that phone call comes through, it is revealed that is Valentina, if you remember from the Thunderbolts. And after this call ends, the Attorney General is just totally on Fisk's side. He says oversight is not needed. And this was a very simple way to show you how integral to the story Matthew Lillard's character is going to be. But not only that, it establishes how capable this character is. He came in there right away, did not hesitate to speak exactly what he wanted to say very easily to a room full of pretty powerful people. So right off the bat, he is a character that I find incredibly compelling. Is it partially because he was Shaggy Rogers? Maybe, but that was more so just a first impression, whereas the more and more we interact with his character, the more I enjoyed his character and want more of him in this series. So he's definitely something that I am looking forward to seeing, and we do get a little bit more of him later on. The next really interesting thing of note is with Dr. Glenn. She is interviewing the swordsman. However, in this moment, she is starting to lose focus, and we see that she is going through some type of PTSD and some major trauma and constantly seeing Muse. And this is affecting her and actually kept affecting her throughout the episode. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this continues to make her either go down a darker path or maybe realize that being in bed with Fisk isn't the right thing to do. I personally think it will actually push her closer to Fisk and lead her to doing darker things because it's going to amplify her hatred for vigilantes. Now, another thing I found really interesting was the whole Safety Streets act. To me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the only reason I say that is the reason a show like Daredevil works, a reason why something like The Defenders works, is you are not dealing with something that is spreading citywide. At least not something that is getting covered in the mainstream media. And by that I mean season 1 was Wilson Fisk, season 2 was The Hand, season 3 was Wilson Fisk again, and then Daredevil Born Again season 1 started to bring everything to the forefront. The only issue with doing that is then you struggle to believe why other characters aren't popping up. And yes, I know we're going to get Jessica Jones in this season and very likely the Punisher. However, there are other characters that should pop up. The two teams of Avengers, the one that was established in the Thunderbolts movie and the one led by the new Captain America. Why is no one doing anything about this? This is no longer a street level event. This is quite literally something that is affecting the entire city of New York. They're literally under martial law. They have curfews by 8 p.m. They have task forces that are going around to civilians, taking people out, kidnapping people, and this is just okay. I find it so hard to believe that any of the Avengers would be okay with this. However, what is probably most egregious about this is that it is happening in New York City. And who lives in New York City? Spider-Man. Now, could you have Spider-Man appear in every single episode of this series? No, absolutely not. From a budget standpoint alone, that wouldn't work. Having Tom Holland's Spider-Man just would not fit. They would not be able to afford him in every single episode. However, even beyond that, I also understand that there are rights issues. Sony very likely would not let him appear in a Marvel TV show. However, that does not give an in-universe explanation as to why this character who resides in New York City and is no longer in high school, who is an actual established hero, is doing nothing about this. You're telling me he looks around, sees the way New York is, sees it under martial law, sees the fact that they are having a curfew that starts at 8 p.m., not to mention the task force that is quite literally going around terrorizing people, and he just says, oh yeah, that's fine, I'll let the devil of Hell's Kitchen handle that. No, that makes absolutely no sense, and this isn't me saying that Spider-Man needs to be in this show. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I understand why they can't do that. However, what I don't understand is them not giving an in-universe explanation as to why certain characters aren't helping out in these certain situations. And it really is doing something as easy as just mentioning the wall crawler disrupted a warehouse chain over here. Maybe Fisk talks about that with one of his henchmen. That way you can see that Spider-Man is doing something to help against these adversaries. Or maybe the fact that the two teams of Avengers are off planet right now, or maybe they are preoccupied with some type of world-ending event elsewhere in the world. That would make sense. That would be something that is plausible. What isn't plausible is the fact that all of this is going on in New York and none of these heroes are doing anything about it. Specifically Spider-Man. Now, I could be proven totally wrong. Spider-Man could show up in 2 to 3 episodes of this season. And if that happens, I will 100% admit I was wrong, be very happy because he's my favorite superhero. However, the likelihood of that happening just is not very high in my opinion. As a fan, I hope it happens, but at the very least, because I don't think they're going to be able to do that, they need to at least mention why certain characters aren't helping out in these certain situations. This is no longer just a minor crisis anymore. It is something that is quite literally affecting New York City. All of the people are being greatly affected. It's getting crazy amounts of news coverage. And yes, I know Fisk mentioned Spider-Man in season 1. However, I feel like there needs to be more of a mention of him messing with their operations. That's a Spider-Man thing to do. To me, Spider-Man would not just let all of this slide. He wouldn't let them go under martial law. So all in all, that is one thing that if it continues, it is going to keep bothering me. Not to say that they need to have Spider-Man appear in multiple episodes or appear at all, but at the very least, they need to give some sort of explanation in universe as to why these characters are not helping in this situation, because this is a full-fledged crisis at this point. Moving along, we do get some interactions with some other characters, and this actually gave me a couple of thoughts, one of which I miss Detective Mahoney. I think he was great. The new person that we get, Jerry, he's okay. He's fine. He isn't someone that I find that compelling. Versus Detective Brett Mahoney, I thoroughly enjoyed his character. I wish he came back. I wish he was a major part of it. I just feel like his dynamic with Daredevil and Foggy Nelson was really great. And speaking of Foggy Nelson, he's someone else that I really miss. I know they're trying to establish different characters and new characters. However, the new partner for Matt Murdock, just to me, never felt like there was that much chemistry there. And to be fair, when comparing the chemistry between those two characters with the chemistry between Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson, nothing is going to realistically compare to that. So I do understand that to a degree. However, even all that being said, it does not erase the fact that I genuinely miss Detective Brett Mahoney and Foggy Nelson. I feel like they were two of the best parts of the original Daredevil series, and I really just want them back. So if they do decide to do some type of Foggy faking his death thing, I will totally be on board with it because I absolutely love the character. Another thing I found interesting about this episode wasn't anything major. The entire puppet Fisk thing was hilarious. That was a little bit of propaganda going against Wilson Fisk. I found that whole moment really hilarious, and I feel like we were supposed to find it funny, but in that moment, I didn't expect myself to actually genuinely laugh at it. It was absolutely hilarious in my opinion. If it didn't land for some people, I get it. Normally that stuff does not land for me, but in this moment, I did find it quite amusing. Now, another scene that I did really enjoy was the dinner scene between Vanessa, Wilson Fisk, and Mr. Charles. Yes, Matthew Lillard, as I mentioned earlier, was going to make another appearance, and his other appearance is actually even better than his first one. You see, he in a way disrespects Vanessa. He asks if she can be privy to all this information, and Wilson Fisk even says this is kind of an insult. This is something that is presumptuous. This is something that's very insulting to the both of us. However, in this moment, Mr. Charles doesn't fully back off. He acknowledges what Wilson Fisk said, and then they just carry on with the conversation. And keep in mind, Wilson Fisk is a person that used to just kill people for disrespecting Vanessa. You look at her wrong, you're going to get killed. You insult her, you're going to get brutally threatened, probably brutally beaten, and very likely murdered. But in this moment, we didn't even see any type of actual rage, at least not anything directed towards Mr. Charles from Wilson Fisk. And that tells me two things. First and foremost, Mr. Charles is going to be a pretty pivotal character moving forward with this season. And thing number two is that whoever Mr. Charles is working for or in league with is so formidable that they not only garner the respect of Wilson Fisk, but they even in some ways put a little bit of fear into Wilson Fisk. Similar to how the Hand did back in season 1. You see, he respected the Hand so much that when there would be any type of hiccup, he genuinely would have fear when talking to Madame Gao about anything that happened, anything that wasn't part of the plan. And this moment felt a lot like that, at least to me. So I'm really excited to see this storyline be really flushed out. As I mentioned, Mr. Charles is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters in this series, so I cannot wait for us to get even more from the character and see where the story goes with him. Another small thing that I found kind of interesting, Dr. Glenn is definitely becoming darker and darker. As I mentioned earlier, she's probably going to be put on one of two paths, either realizing Fisk is wrong or doubling down and becoming even more ingratiated into what Fisk wants to do. And in this moment, she is quite literally altering psych documents and psych evaluations on the orders of someone who is directly under Fisk. So you can see that she is going to slowly but surely become more and more ingratiated into what Wilson Fisk wants to do. And while all this is happening, she continues to see Muse. So I feel like this is just going to push her further and further down that dark path. And she may not be a character that gets redemption in the end. She may end up getting some type of tragic fate. Now, something else that I actually forgot to write down was an interaction between Karen Page and BB Urich, Ben Urich's daughter. This was really interesting to me because they could have done something in this moment when Karen told BB that Ben Urich's death was probably Karen's fault and that he was probably only killed because he was protecting Karen in that moment. And for a second, I thought they were going to go down the route of BB being incredibly angry at Karen and being resentful towards her. However, they didn't do this. And I'm really happy they didn't do that. I cannot stand when a show does that. It, to me, is the biggest character assassination they can do. It disrupts everything that we know about a character and puts them in such an emotional state that just does not function with logic. I get that we're dealing with a tragedy in these moments. However, I feel like you should still have some degree of logic, especially when you know who your father was. And not only that, you've known Karen Page at least for a little bit, and it's not like she was directly involved with his murder. She was literally someone that your father just deemed worthy of protecting. He was doing an honorable thing. So I like that they didn't spit in the face of that and kind of dishonor the memory of Ben Urich doing that. I feel like it was just her being more sad, realizing how dark Wilson Fisk is, and the fact that her father was murdered simply for not giving up the identity of Karen Page. And I feel like that's going to help propel her character, and she might become a character that I do find very compelling. Because as I mentioned, once she got to that crossroads and decided to not go down the route of character assassination, I definitely started to find her character way more compelling. I did have some worries in that moment. If she would have had a negative reaction against Karen, I probably wouldn't like her character that much. However, she did not go down that route, and I am really happy about that. Now, another thing with her character, we do see her getting pretty close with Wilson Fisk's right-hand man, and in these moments, she is trying to manipulate him, and although he does seem pretty naive in these moments, I feel like it is actually going to be something that he ends up being more manipulative than she thinks, and he could either end up turning on her, and it could result in her death. However, that would feel like retreading some things that happened with Ben Urich. Having practically the same fate befall his daughter wouldn't really make sense. However, what would make sense is Fisk's right-hand man, I'm forgetting his name, I'm pretty sure it's Danny, realizing he is in the wrong and choosing to help BB Urich, and in these triumphant moments, he is actually killed. That's probably one of my biggest predictions for the latter half of this season. But that is not the end of it, because we get an awesome action sequence at the end, Daredevil taking down some cops. However, while this is going on, Jerry quite literally starts to have a heart attack. He even grabs his arm. But what is most interesting about this, we see Matt have flashbacks to Foggy. We see Matt remembering him hearing Foggy's last heartbeats. And in this moment, it distracts him enough to be taken down by all of the officers, to the point where they had him pinned down and removed his mask. And in this moment, I actually thought that either Jerry or the Punisher would come in and save Matt. I knew that all the task force would end up getting killed as soon as they took off Daredevil's mask. You're not going to let that happen in the very first episode, so everyone who saw his identity is going to be killed. But it is at that point that all of them get sniped out. And as I mentioned before, I thought this was going to be the Punisher helping out Matt Murdock, but it is at that point we see the knife pop in, and on it you see Bullseye's insignia, signifying this was Bullseye helping out Daredevil. And I feel like we are going to get a little bit of a friends to enemies, at least for a short time in this season, because of the vendetta Bullseye has against Fisk and Vanessa. I feel like he's going to table everything that he has against Daredevil, and the same goes for Daredevil. I feel like even though Bullseye is quite literally the one who killed Foggy, I think he might table a lot of those emotions to take down Fisk, and their battle will be postponed until everything with Fisk is solved. All in all, I feel like there was a lot of enjoyable things in this episode. It was a little bit boring at times. It felt a little bit slow. I'm hoping that things start to definitely ramp up as more characters get introduced, more heroes come in. We already know that Jessica Jones will be in this season, so that's something that I am definitely looking forward to. But I'm interested to hear from all of you guys. What did you think of the first episode? And do you have as as big of an issue as I do with this whole task force and them not even mentioning where other heroes are? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.